Hello and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Wargaming, and today we are going to be looking at another bolt action how to build guide, and I think this one is going to be pretty highly anticipated, as it is for the late war Germans. And the reason I say that is because the late war Germans really do have a lot of toys and equipment they can throw on their units. And in a game like bolt action, where almost every faction has very similar rules, late war Germans are one of the few squads, rivaled only by the American units, that really have other options as to how to equip them, that makes them dramatically differ from that standard infantry squad build we've been looking at since the initial British infantry video that I did for this series. And let's be honest here, the reason most people are playing German is because of the equipment they get. Germany had a high emphasis on technology, and that goes from things as large as planes and rockets, all the way down to their tanks, and then even down to their small arms. They pioneered what is essentially the predecessor to the RPG and the AK-47, and really did lay the groundwork for small arms that would define the 20th century. So, while I am an Africa Corps player myself, and I do find fascination in that period of the war, I gotta say I do have some serious FOMO on that late war German equipment, because it is all very iconic, very fun to build and paint on the 28mm scale, and actually performs very, very well in the bolt action rule sets. So late war Germans are definitely something worth looking into, and if you're picking up any of these three boxes, be it the German Grenadiers, Fallschirmjäger, or Waffen-SS, you will be abiding to this building guide, and the recommendations I set forth to building a good core force out of one infantry box. But a little bit of disclaimer about these box set: if you're going for generic late war Germans, go with the Grenadier sets. The Fallschirmjäger are the German paratroopers. They are a little bit more specialized, they have those unique helmets, and they also can kind of fit into that mid-war period. But if you do so, you will be choosing not to use those Panzerfaust and FG-42s. So they are a bit of a niche in that regard. And then the Waffen-SS is of course their own faction within the German military, and they are definitely worth doing some research on before diving into it. First of all, they are pretty hardcore Nazis, so if that's something you're not comfortable owning or having on your shelf, maybe don't go into that. But they do also have a very interesting history with foreign nationals serving within their ranks, hence the Croatian fezzes on the sprue. So I think they are worth doing some research on and planning out a bit whether you know you want to go with that sort of army or not. Long story short, go with German Grenadiers if you just want to do generic late war Germans. If you're looking for something a little more specialized, do your research and check out the Fallschirmjäger and the Waffen-SS. But as always, this video is going to be broken down into two parts, and here we're going to have the basic infantry build, and then the command and specialist build that we're going to look at, and basically these rely on two different buying practices. If you plan on buying the blister packs or support groups that Warlord Games offers of the command squads and special weapons, you can go ahead and stick with the basic infantry build, and this is really going to allow you to take that 30-man box set and capitalize on building infantry squads. That will give you a very solid core foundation of infantry that's going to allow you to be pretty flexible in your bolt action matches. But if you're just getting into the game and you want to kind of just dip your toes in and maybe spend some more money later down the road on a second infantry box, you can go ahead with the second option being our command and specialist build. And basically here, we're going to build two infantry squads, a command squad, and then some support models, which is going to fill out your basic platoon roster of one command and two infantry squads. That way you can buy this box set and immediately jump into a game of bolt action with a legal list. Also, if you have an aversion to building or painting metal models, this will be the option you should go with, as most of the blister packs and support groups that Warlord offers are still metal. Now, a little bit of my personal experience. When I first jumped into the game, I went with the command and specialist build, and then down the road I ended up getting more infantry boxes and sprues to flesh out my forces with generic riflemen and infantry models. And if you already have or plan on just kind of taking the plunge and getting multiple box sets, I would go ahead, build one command and specialist build, and then just do the rest as the basic infantry build. That's going to give you a very solid base for an army, and I don't think that's ever going to leave you building a list and having to go check your inventory of your collection to make sure you have the models to represent said list. But with no further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump in and look at the basic infantry build. And right off the bat, you notice it is not similar to the other ones we have seen earlier, which is usually a SMG sergeant with a squad of riflemen and 1 or 2 LMGs. This one is going to be quite different here, and that is because the Germans have access to STG-44s and FG-42 assault rifles. Now, the Grenadiers and the Waffen-SS are going to have the STG-44s, which are pictured on this slide on screen right here. These are going to be assault rifles, while the Fallschirmjäger are going to have the experimental prototype FG-42s. And those are very unique looking little rifles. They're going to have the magazine coming out of the side with a short scope mounted on top. But both of these rifles will count as assault rifles and use the exact same rules. And to put it bluntly, assault rifles have the exact same rules as SMGs. You're just going to be spending 2 more points to get 6 more inches of range there. Now, they used to offer double range, which was incredibly powerful, but I think that got nerfed sometime along the road. But 18 inches is still a respectable amount. 6 inches in bolt action goes a long way. Ignore all innuendos implied there. And honestly, there is an argument to be made about loading squads up with SMGs and saving points over the assault rifles, especially if you're trying to build a melee unit and you just want to get that tough fighters for as cheap as possible. But if you're playing late war Germans, it's probably because you are going to want to be using assault rifles. So we are going to be loading this basic infantry squad up with 3 assault rifles. Of course, one of them is going to be the NCO. And as always for NCOs, that's non-commissioned officers, i.e. sergeants, I would recommend giving them a pointing hand or perhaps a pair of binoculars to signify their rank, rather than giving them the peaked cap. I like to save the peaked caps for your commanding officers, and having too many of them on the field does get a little saturated. But as your NCO usually is one of the last people you want to die in the squad, I would definitely recommend giving him the better piece of equipment, i.e. the assault rifle. Now, after that, you are going to notice a little Panzerfaust logo below the second assault rifle wielder. And Panzerfaust are your number 2 reason you're going to be playing late war Germans. They are little handheld rocket launchers that are 1 shot, 12-inch range, penetration 6, shape charge, and you can have up to 4 of them in 1 unit. And let me just tell you right now, Panzerfausts are extremely powerful. In fact, I would argue that they are maybe the best infantry-based anti-tank weapon in bolt action, mainly because of the numbers and point cost that you can field them in. But I will be giving Panzerfausts their own video down the road. At the moment, just know that if you're playing late war Germans, or even Soviets for that matter, you are going to be building Panzerfausts. And because of their naturally short range, it is worthwhile modeling them onto an assault rifle or submachine gun wielding model, as those units are usually going to be getting close to enemy units anyways. But really, this is where things get really tricky with these box sets, because it is going to be, how do I WYSIWYG model my units to have the right guns and then the right accessories? Usually you just have to choose the appropriate weapon, and then that represents everything the model has. When you throw a Panzerfaust into the equation, things change quite a bit. And while I am a pretty much strictly WYSIWYG player, this is the one occasion in bolt action where I do tend to stretch the rules a little bit. Because in most of these box sets, you are going to be getting 2 kinds of Panzerfausts to equip on your models. You will have ones that are outright accessories that are going to strap onto their rucks, or be carried in a slung position alongside their main armaments. Alternatively, you will be getting arms that are outright wielding, aiming, and ready to fire the Panzerfaust. And that really does give you 2 roads on how to equip these guys in your collection arsenal. And to put it bluntly, you can do one of 2 things. First, you can have a guy with an assault rifle and a Panzerfaust on his back. If you have that, you can say that this guy objectively has an assault rifle. He may or may not have a Panzerfaust on his back, and I will dedicate to my opponent, before the match begins, that this squad is in fact equipped with Panzerfaust, and this is the model representing the Panzerfaust in that squad. Alternatively, you could build your infantry models wielding just a Panzerfaust in the firing position, and no other weapon alongside him. In that scenario, you can throw him into any squad you want, be it an all-rifleman squad, an SMG veteran squad, or a squad with half assault rifles. And in that scenario, you will basically have to do vice versa, saying, hey, this guy is in this all-rifleman squad, he is a rifleman, but he is the Panzerfaust wielder. So if you like to run a lot of mono weapon squads, this may be a viable option as to where you can just throw one Panzerfaust wielding guy in the squad and say, here's the representative of the Faust. He has the same weapon as everyone else in the squad. There you go. But if you do like running squads with more diverse weapons equipped to them, I would recommend going with the previous option and modeling your assault-based weapons with Panzerfaust on their side. Now, both options are viable, and if you have a lot of box sets, feel free to completely WYSIWYG it with the appropriate weapon and a Panzerfaust also. Just know that there are more economic ways of going about it. The main thing is just to alert your opponent at the beginning of the game and letting them know which squad has Panzerfaust and how many they have. Personally, it's never been a problem, and I think if you're an honest player, it never will be. But hey, you know what, I'll be honest, it's Wargaming. There's people out there who like to cheat. There's people out there who like to accuse people of cheating, which is cheating in its own way. And if you really want to avoid all of that, you can honestly just get Dragon Tiers and put them next to your squad to signify each Panzerfaust in the squad, and take one off each time a Panzerfaust is fired. There's really a lot of ways of doing it, and these are just my recommendations on how to model them. But moving on from that, we do have an extra assault rifle in the basic infantry build, and you have the option to take them. If you're playing late war Germans, you're probably going to be either playing Volkssturm or Veterans, both of which make great use of assault rifles in numbers, so why not equip them? Why not have those models in your arsenal? And I suppose now is a good time to mention that just because I recommend that you build 3 of these squads, doesn't mean that's how they should be fielded every single game. You can take 6 of your assault rifle models and put them into a 10-man squad with no LMG, and make them your offensive assault squad. Meanwhile, you can take the rest of those riflemen and the extra LMG left over and make them a fire support squad who sits in the backfield and chews away at enemies with that buzzsaw from a distance. Again, this is an emphasis on how to build the models to give you the most flexibility in your collection arsenal. It's not a bona fide recommendation on how to field them every game. That being said, in this specific video with this basic infantry build, if you fielded 3 German infantry squads with this build, you would actually have some pretty imposing infantry squads for your enemy to go up against. Just know you'd be paying a lot extra for a take-all-comer squad that's not as specialized. But I digress, and now we are on to the riflemen, and we are going to have 6 riflemen here, one of which I recommended equipping a Panzerfaust with. Now, this is the guy who I would maybe recommend being that no weapon, just holding the Panzerfaust aiming guy, because as far as that WYSIWYG goes, it is more advantageous to have the guy with the closer range weapon with the Panzerfaust due to its 12-inch range. But at the end of the day, if you do decide to build a rifleman with a Panzerfaust, it's not the end of the world. You can make great use of him. And if you want to put more of an emphasis on affordable squads, he will absolutely come in handy. In fact, it's good to remind German players that not every model you have has to be an Übermensch with an assault rifle and a Panzerfaust at their hip. Sometimes having an affordable rifleman squad packing a Panzerfaust can be the more economic way to go when building a list. But 4 of those riflemen are going to be basic riflemen holding the Kar 98, and I will make time to mention how, again with the equipment and all the options you have, there are going to be Gewehr 43s on these sprues. Now, Gewehr 43s are basically the German version of the SVT or the M1 Garand, if you want to be critical in that way. It was Germany's semi-automatic rifle issued to their troops. On the sprue, it is going to be a traditional style rifle with the buttocks and wood grain going all the way up to the barrel, but the barrel is going to protrude out of the wood grain a little bit further in the front, despite being shorter overall, and it is going to have a box magazine on the bottom. If you're building the Grenadier sprue, just look for the rifle where the tip looks like it's always about to break. However, when it comes to building your models, whether you want to have them have the Gewehr 43 or the Kar 98, it does not matter as far as rules go. Both count as a standard rifleman. Do not stress about it. So with the STG, the FG42, the Panzerfaust, and the Gewehr 43 out of the way, I think we have all of the niche variety as far as German sprues go under our belt, and we can move on with the simpler stuff from here. You will have one of those 6 riflemen be a loader for the MG42 in this squad. Again, loaders can be represented by either just carrying an ammo can or having belts around their neck. You can even represent them by putting MG42 ammo cases on their bases by their feet. That way you can use them as regular riflemen if you don't want to take an MG. Or they could be represented as simply by kneeling next to the prone machine gunner. Again, there's options to be had, and there's no reason that you can't always use this rifleman as a regular rifleman should you not have an LMG in the squad. And after that, that is going to bring us to the LMG itself, which is going to be the MG42 by late war. You guys all know what this gun looks like. It's the MG42. It's legendary. It is the buzzsaw itself. But for whatever reason, if you find yourself with an MG34, feel free to use it. They use MG34s all the way up till the end of the war. In fact, I think variants of the MG34 saw service long after the MG42 was retired. But really, that's all besides the point. Either the 34 or the 42 will serve as your LMG for the squad and accurately represent that buzzsaw keyword. And while I am a bit of a naysayer for the buzzsaw keyword, as I believe it coaxes you into paying more for more LMGs and kind of limiting your points pool, they honestly are pretty essential to have in a force, and honestly, having one veteran squad with 2 LMGs sit in the backfield and plink away at enemies is a pretty rewarding tactic that can provide a lot of valuable support to your advancing infantry. So if you plan on getting a headquarters blister pack or a support group units, this is a valid way to build your infantry box sets. But if you want to go the plastic HQ route and build it out of this 30-man box set and have just enough to get into a game of bolt action with just one infantry box and 30 models, we're going to go ahead and jump over to our next build recommendation, which is the Command and Specialist build. And right away, you see a lot of different weapons on the screen right here with a lot of different accessories. And once again, I will emphasize that is because the Germans, late war, have a lot of variety in terms of equipment. But I will say this, there is not really any special weapons to be found on these sprues. You're not going to be able to build any snipers or anti-tank rifles in here, which makes those support group expansions a little bit more appealing than they normally would be. But to break it down, we're going to have 2 main infantry squads here, and again, these aren't necessarily how I recommend fielding them every game, but it is how I recommend building them. But one is going to be your support squad, which I've kind of already hinted at earlier, and the other is going to be your assault squad. And both of these are going to be 10-man squads, leaving another 10 guys kind of free-floating to either build your command squad or other units nearby. But let's go ahead and take a look at that fire support squad. It is going to be 8 riflemen in a row with 1 NCO and 2 leaders being a part of those riflemen, followed up by 2 LMGs. Now, while you could field this squad as a valuable support squad who just kind of sits on an objective a little bit further away and fires away at enemies from cover with those 2 LMG buzzsaws, this is more importantly a foundation for your force, which is going to be a bunch of riflemen. Now, every faction in bolt action needs a bunch of riflemen. There's no way about it. You can run equipped infantry squads, you can run veterans with SMGs and Brandenburgers and things of the sort, but at the end of the day, if you want to win in bolt action, you are going to need a viable pool of riflemen to build basic infantry squads from to flesh out your activations. And that's mainly what this first squad is doing for you, whether you want to field them as a LMG fire team or not. And the next squad build recommended here is going to be more or less the antithesis to that ideology, where it is going to be your pimped out, fully equipped veteran Ubermensch squad who is going to be pushing on the enemies and providing you that pool of models to build more elite and specialized operatives. So first up in the assault squad, you are going to have your NCO, who is of course going to have an assault rifle on him, followed up by 3 more assault rifle wielding veterans who are going to be carrying Panzerfaust also. Now, as I recommended earlier, it's always good to have Panzerfaust on assault weapons like SMGs or assault rifles, because those weapons need to be close anyways. So why not have them in a fully equipped squad? After that, we are going to have 5 riflemen, one of which is going to be a loader. So you see, even in a fully pimped out squad like this, we still need riflemen. But of course, with that loader comes another MG42, and you really do want a solid foundation of MG42s for your German army. It's just good to have them around, especially with that buzzsaw. I would say for every box set you have, you should be building probably 4 LMGs, which is pictured in this suggested build. And after that, we will jump over to the command squad, which of course is going to be 3 guys all sporting assault rifles. And as we all know, command squads get their weapon upgrades for free, so why not take 15 free points and get 3 assault rifles? This will turn your 3-man command squad into a pretty lethal little squad that can put out as much firepower as most generic infantry if you're springing them late in the battle. It can also make them pretty intimidating to be assaulted in close combat, as it is going to be 3 models with the tough fighter special rule. However, as we all know, you do not always need to take 3 models in your command squad, and many times it is advantageous just to take 2 so you can get that small team bonus and become harder to hit. And in that scenario, you're going to have an extra assault rifle to throw wherever you want in your ranks. So of course, why not build him like that? Now, one slight disclaimer here, if you are building the Waffen SS squad, you are going to have a hand with that awesome broom handle Mauser. That thing is just great. I always talk about modeling your officers with revolvers or things of the sort. If you got the SS box set, you really got to make use of that broom handle Mauser. I mean, where else is it going to show up in your army? Go ahead, throw it on your officer, say it's an assault rifle or submachine gun if you want. It doesn't have its own rules, so just clarify with your opponent ahead of time. I'm sure he'll have no problem with it representing that. Though in real life, the broom handle Mauser is much more comparable to a submachine gun than a STG. But after that, we are going to have our miscellaneous groups here, and usually this is where you do see the special weapons like a sniper or anti-tank rifle team show up, but we don't have that in this box set. So first up, I am going to recommend building 3 more Panzerfaust models. Now, I already recommended you build 3 with the assault rifles. Now I recommend you build 3 just holding the Panzerfaust and no other weapons. Now, I went over my personal logic as to why I think it's good to have a mix of both earlier, but if you really want to commit these Panzerfausts to a certain WYSIWYG role, like if you know you're going to have riflemen or submachine gunners with Panzerfaust, go ahead and model them that way. I don't really care what weapons you equip to them on top of that, but I do recommend you have 3 more Panzerfaust wielding models, because each veteran squad can take up to 4 Panzerfaust, and I think 3 is the sweet spot. Although 4 isn't really that bad of overkill. 20 points knocking out a 100-point vehicle is pretty justifiable. So if you were to completely disregard my orders here, and throw another 2 Panzerfaust on, say, maybe 2 of those riflemen in the regular rifle squad, I wouldn't really argue with you on that, but I think 6 is a sweet spot for a 30-man box set, especially if you don't know whether you're going to be using Panzerfaust or not. And again, at the end of the day, you can always just put a marker in the units saying that you have this many Panzerfaust shots within the squad. But that leaves us with a few miscellaneous weapons here, and I would recommend just building 1 extra STG or FG42 assault rifle. It's always good to have more in case you want to throw them in, followed by 2 riflemen and 1 LMG. Now, the extra LMG is going to be good if you really want to put an emphasis on range combat and make use of that buzzsaw national characteristic. And having 2 riflemen present is, again, just padding out your force and having those extra bodies that you can throw in to stretch out extra squads. I want to again emphasize, despite all the toys available to you with the late war Germans, riflemen are still going to be the core of your force, and you are going to need a lot of them to pad out your lists. So to sum up late war Germany, assault rifles and Panzerfaust are both very good, maybe Panzerfaust being a little bit more important than assault rifles. However, you need to be sure not to overload on either of them, and make sure you don't skimp on the riflemen. But if you're a seasoned bolt-action player, let me know what you think. What's your experience with Panzerfaust, assault rifles? How do you feel about the Buzzsaw LMG? Do you think I'm underselling it? Do you think it's better than assault rifles? And if you have any recommendations on how to build and field late war German infantry, please leave it in a comment below. And as always, if you liked the video, go ahead, hit like, consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. Turn on notifications to give me a little bit of a boost in that alien phenomenon that is the YouTube algorithm. And until next time, guys, take care.